Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between towering grey mountains, beneath an endless sky of soft, pale clouds, lived a girl named Elara. Her world was colourless, not just the stones of the streets or the walls of the houses, but even the clothes people wore and the fields they tilled. The sun shone, but its light was dull, like an old lantern whose flame had grown tired. No one in the village remembered a time when colours danced through the world. The elders whispered of golden mornings and sapphire skies, of emerald forests and crimson roses, but they spoke of these things like distant dreams, as if the world had simply forgotten how to shine. And yet, in Elara's heart, a longing stirred, a longing for something more. One day, as Elara wandered past the edges of her village, she followed the soft whisper of the wind through a thicket of bare trees. There, half hidden beneath a veil of ivy, stood a forgotten cottage. Its wooden door, worn with time, was slightly ajar. With cautious steps, Elara entered. Inside, dust danced in the air, catching what little light seeped through the broken windows. The room was nearly empty, except for something tucked into the farthest corner, a loom. But not just any loom. This one was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. Its frame was carved from silverwood, polished so finely it shimmered. Strange symbols wound along its edges, and stretched across it was a single golden thread, glowing faintly as if waiting. As Elara reached out and brushed the thread, a spark of colour burst into the air. It swirled and shimmered, soft as mist, bright as morning. The colour landed on her fingertip, sinking into her skin, and suddenly, for the first time in her life, Elara saw the blue of her own veins. Trembling with wonder, Elara sat before the loom and picked up the shuttle. She had never woven before, yet as she moved the shuttle through the golden thread, instinct guided her hands. As the first thread passed through, a stripe of red flowed from the loom, rolling outward like a wave of light. The second, a deep, rich orange. With each pass, a new colour bloomed: yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, until a rainbow cloth spilled onto the floor, humming with energy. Elara's breath caught. The world around her still remained grey, but the cloth in her hands glowed like sunrise. She wrapped it around her shoulders and stepped outside. The moment the wind touched it, colours rippled outward, sinking into the ground, creeping up tree trunks, swirling into the sky. The world gasped awake. The first streak of blue swept across the heavens. The first bloom of green unfurled in the fields. And yet, just as quickly as it came, the colour faded. The trees returned to grey, the sky dimmed, the cloth in Elara's hands dulling to pale silver. The magic was fleeting. The world wanted more. Elara hurried home, heart pounding with excitement and fear. She had found the secret to bringing colour back, but should she share it? She thought of her quiet village, the people who had long accepted their world of grey. What if they didn't understand? What if someone tried to take the loom from her? So she kept the secret to herself. Each night, she slipped away to the cottage and wove more rainbow cloth. She stitched pieces into her cloak, into her shoes, even wove a ribbon for her hair. Wherever she walked, she left traces of colour behind. A red rosebud, a golden leaf, a blue feather drifting on the wind. People began to wonder. They whispered of a girl who carried the dawn in her footsteps. Some followed her trails of colour, desperate to know where they led. And then, one evening, a little boy tugged on her cloak and asked, "Why does the world wake up only where you walk?" Elara's heart ached. What good was colour if it belonged only to her? That night, Elara sat before the loom, staring at the glowing threads. She had a choice. She could weave the colours for herself, live in a world of beauty while the rest of the village remained grey. Or she could do something greater. With a deep breath, Elara picked up the shuttle. This time, she didn't weave a single cloth. She wove a sky full of colours. She wove the gold of sunlight, the blue of deep lakes, the green of forests long forgotten. She wove enough colour for the world, and when the final thread was pulled, the loom began to hum. The rainbow cloth lifted into the air, unravelling. Threads of light spun outward, racing across the sky, across mountains and rivers, across the village and beyond. People woke to find roses blushing red, wheat fields golden, rivers shimmering in sapphire hues. Laughter rang as they twirled in meadows now bursting with colour, their faces painted with the hues of joy. And as the colour spread, the loom, its purpose fulfilled, slowly faded away, vanishing into the wind like a whispered secret. Elara stood on the hilltop, watching in awe as the colours unfolded like the petals of a long sleeping flower. It was no longer just streaks of red and gold or splashes of blue and green. It was life itself, awakened in ways she could barely comprehend. The sky stretched overhead, a breathtaking canvas of dawn and dusk entwined, where the deepest blues kissed the softest pinks, and golden sunlight filtered through clouds tinged with lavender and peach. Birds, their wings now gleaming in dazzling hues, soared across the heavens, their songs rippling through the air like a long-lost melody. Below, the village that had once been grey was now bursting with colour. The stone cottages stood warm under the embrace of the sun, their walls reflecting soft shades of ochre, russet and sapphire. Windowsills overflowed with blushing roses, golden marigolds, and violets that shimmered in the morning light. Laughter echoed through the streets as people marvelled at their new world. Children ran through the meadows, their hands outstretched, spinning in dizzy delight as fields of emerald grass swayed like an ocean of colour. They wove crowns from wildflowers the world had forgotten, pressing them onto their heads like little kings and queens of a bright new kingdom. The elders traced their fingertips over trees now covered in soft pink blossoms, their eyes shining with unshed tears as they remembered the legends they had spoken of for so long. Legends that were no longer myths, but real, breathing truths before them. And in the very heart of the village, people gathered in the square, standing beneath a fountain that now shimmered with water so clear and blue, it reflected the sky like a mirror. Then something wonderful happened. A little girl with auburn curls and golden freckles tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed up toward the hill where Elara stood. "It was her," the girl whispered. She brought the colours back. Slowly, one by one, the villagers turned their gaze to Elara. Some gasped. Others clutched their hands to their chests. The baker, covered in flour, let out a joyful laugh, while the old storyteller wiped a tear from his eye. And then they began to climb. A procession of voices, young and old, rising toward her like a river of gratitude. They carried gifts, freshly picked flowers, ribbons of silk, baskets of fruit so bright they looked like drops of sunshine. Elara stepped forward, suddenly uncertain. She had never expected this. She had woven the colours for the world, not for recognition. But then, a little boy no older than 5 broke free from the crowd, his small hands clutching something. A single red rose. He held it up to her, his eyes wide with admiration, his voice barely above a whisper. "For you." Elara took the flower, her fingers trembling as she held it close. And in that moment, Something warm bloomed deep in her chest, a realization as golden as the dawn now painting the horizon. She had given the world color, but in return, they had given her something far greater: belonging, love, home. A gentle breeze lifted her hair, carrying whispers of laughter, of life renewed, of a world that would never fade again. And as Alara stood there, surrounded by the people she had once feared wouldn't understand, she smiled, because she knew at last that she had woven not just colors into the world, she had woven joy, hope, and endless possibility. And the world would never forget the Rainbow Weaver.